Helena Brandt's fingers closed around the glass vial in her pocket. 6 white pills. Cyanide. Enough to kill her in 90 seconds. She was 34 years old, a Wehrmacht senior nurse, 12 years of service to the Reich, 12 years of absolute certainty about who was right and who was wrong in this war. Through the window she watched Canadian tanks form a semicircle around the field hospital. 37 vehicles, maybe 200 soldiers, all of them pointing their weapons at this building, at her. The sunrise came at 6:47, but Helena felt no warmth. Inside the hospital, 147 wounded German soldiers lay in beds. Most couldn't walk, none could fight. 31 medical staff remained 27 women, 4 elderly doctors. The young doctors had been conscripted months ago. The young men were all dead or captured. Helena was the head nurse, the ranking medical officer after the doctors. The other women looked to her for orders, for leadership, for courage. She had no courage left, only the pills. 2 nurses stood beside her at the window. Frieda Klein, 22 years old, from a farm in Bavaria, hands shaking, eyes red from crying, and Keta Weber, 19, from Berlin. Her father died in Russia. Her mother disappeared when the bombs destroyed their neighborhood. "Frau Brandt," Frieda whispered, should we take them now before they come inside?" Helena looked at the pills in her palm. White, small, clean. A quick death instead of torture. For months, the propaganda officers had told them what would happen if the enemy captured medical staff. The same words, over and over, at every meeting, in every briefing. The Canadians will torture you. They see you as worse than soldiers. You helped German fighters. You kept them alive to kill more Allied troops. They will make you pay. They will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. They will kill you slowly. Helena had believed every word. She was a good National Socialist. She trusted the party. She trusted the Führer. She had given 12 years of her life to the cause. Now, watching those tanks, she reached for that trust one more time. "Not yet," she told Frieda. "Wait until they enter. We die with dignity, not cowering." Keta laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Dignity. My father died for nothing. My mother is gone. And we're standing here talking about dignity." "Then die however you want," Helena said, her voice sharp. "But I won't let them see me afraid." A lie. She was terrified. Outside, a Canadian officer appeared. He carried a white flag, walking slowly toward the hospital entrance. No weapon in his hands. Just the flag. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs. "They're coming. Girls, be brave. It will be quick." She moved to the stove where documents were burning. Patient records. Supply lists. Anything the enemy might use. She threw more papers into the flames. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the folders. The door opened. Helena straightened, prepared herself, waiting for the rifle butts, the shouting, the violence. Captain Roderick Hayes stepped through the doorway. He was tall, maybe 40 years old. His uniform was clean, his boots polished. He lowered his rifle as he entered, set it against the wall. Helena's mind couldn't process what she was seeing. Enemy soldiers didn't disarm themselves. Conquerors didn't set down their weapons. Hayes looked around the room, at the wounded German soldiers in their beds, at the blood-stained sheets, at the nurses in their grey uniforms, at the old doctors standing frozen by the surgical table. Then he spoke. In German. Perfect, unaccented German. "Sie sind immer noch Krankenschwestern." "You're still nurses." Helena stared at him. The words made no sense. Nurses, not prisoners, not enemies. Hayes continued, his voice calm and professional. Medical personnel are protected under the Geneva Convention. You will continue to care for these patients until we arrange transport. Do you understand? Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Helena's hand tightened around the pills in her pocket. This was the trick. The propaganda officers had warned about this too. The enemy would pretend kindness. Lower your guard. Then attack when you're defenseless. Verstehen Sie? Hayes asked again. Do you understand? One of the old doctors nodded. Ja, Herr Hauptmann. Hayes's expression softened slightly. We have medical supplies in our trucks, food and water. We'll bring them in within the hour. Your wounded will be treated. You will not be harmed. He turned and left. Just like that. No threats, no violence, no torture. Helena stood frozen. The pills burned in her palm like hot coals. She should have taken them, should have died rather than face whatever trap this was. But Hayes had called them nurses, not prisoners, not war criminals. Nurses. That one word cracked something inside her. A hairline fracture in 12 years of certainty. An hour later, Canadian soldiers brought supplies, not taken from German stocks, fresh supplies, from their own trucks, wooden crates stamped with English words Helena couldn't read, medical equipment still in factory packaging, bandages, morphine, sulfur drugs, and food. Helena watched as soldiers carried in boxes of white bread, real white bread, soft and fresh. The smell filled the hospital. She hadn't smelled bread like that since 1942. Butter, yellow and creamy. In quantities she couldn't comprehend. Canned meat. When they opened the first tin, Helena saw actual pieces of meat inside, not the grey paste the Wehrmacht had been calling meat for the past year. A Canadian corporal approached her. Young, maybe 25. He smiled. Actually smiled at her. "Miss," he said in broken German, "for you, eat." He held out a plate, bread with butter, a piece of the canned meat, an apple, fresh fruit. Helena stared at it like it was made of gold. "It's not poisoned," the corporal said, still smiling. He took a bite of bread from an identical plate he carried, chewed, swallowed. "See safe. You eat now." Helena took the plate. Her hands trembled. This had to be a psychological tactic. Feed them well before the interrogations. Make them soft. Make them grateful. Then extract information. She took a small bite of the bread, the texture, the taste. Her body remembered what real food was supposed to be like. Her eyes burned with sudden tears. Frida stood next to her, also eating, also crying. "Frau Brandt," she whispered, "why are they feeding us?" "I don't know," Helena admitted. Keta bit into her apple with aggressive force. "They're fattening us before slaughter, like farmers with livestock." Maybe that was it. A practical explanation. Feed the prisoners before killing them. The meat would be... Helena's stomach turned. No, that was insane, even to think it. She looked around the hospital. Canadian soldiers were helping wounded German soldiers. Actually helping them. Changing bandages. Giving morphine for pain. A Canadian medic was setting a broken arm with the same care he would use on one of his own men. The propaganda officers said the Canadians were animals. Barbarians who didn't follow any rules of war. But these soldiers had more discipline than the Wehrmacht troops Helena had worked with. They were polite. They called the nurses Miss and held doors open. When Helena dropped a bandage, a Canadian private picked it up and handed it back to her. "Here you go, miss," he said in heavily accented German. She took it without speaking. Couldn't speak. Her worldview was fracturing with every polite gesture, every kindness, every moment they didn't torture her. 3 days passed. Helena kept the pills in her pocket, waiting for the trap to spring, waiting for the cruelty to begin. It didn't come. The Canadians brought 3 meals every day, every single day. More food than Helena had seen in months. Each nurse received approximately 2,400 calories. Helena knew because she counted, mentally calculated the numbers. For the past year, Wehrmacht rations had been 1,100 calories per day, sometimes less. Her body didn't know what to do with this abundance. Her stomach ached after the first full meal. Her digestive system had forgotten how to process real food. On the second night, Frida couldn't sleep. She sat on her cot, staring at a piece of bread she'd hidden in her pocket. "Why?" she asked the darkness. "Why do they give us so much?" Keta rolled over. "Stop asking. Just eat it before they change their minds." But Helena understood the question. It was the same question she'd been asking herself. If the Canadians planned to kill them, why waste resources, food, medicine, time? Unless they weren't planning to kill them at all. The thought was terrifying. More terrifying than the torture would have been, because if the Canadians weren't planning torture, if they genuinely followed the Geneva Convention, if they treated prisoners humanely, then everything Helena believed for 12 years was wrong. On the morning of April 19th, Captain Hayes returned. "It's time," he said. "We're evacuating this hospital. You'll come with us." Helena's heart stopped. Here it was, the end. They'd been softened up. Now came the real treatment. "To where?" she asked. Her voice barely worked. "Processing center. Then transport to Canada." Canada. Helena couldn't have heard that correctly. Canada was across an ocean, on another continent. Hayes nodded. "Prison camp." "But you'll be treated according to international law. Medical personnel aren't considered combatants." Keta stepped forward. "Will you separate us?" Hayes looked puzzled by the question. "No. Why would we medical units stay together? It's easier that way." Easier. As if logistics mattered more than cruelty. As if efficiency trumped sadism. Helena had no framework to understand this. They were loaded onto trucks, 27 nurses, 4 doctors. Helena had expected cattle cars, freight trains like the ones used to transport. She stopped that thought, forced it down. She didn't let herself think about the camps, about where those trains went. That was different. Those were enemies of the state, not soldiers, not prisoners of war. But the distinction felt thinner now, more fragile. The trucks had seats, canvas sides that let them see outside. 2 guards rode with them. Both women, Canadian Women's Army Corps, professional, distant but not hostile. One offered cigarettes to the German nurses. Helena refused, convinced they were poisoned. Keta took one, smoked it. Nothing happened to her. She didn't convulse, didn't die, just smoked a cigarette like a normal person. As the trucks drove through the German countryside, Helena watched her homeland pass by. Ruins. Everywhere ruins. Cities reduced to rubble, bridges destroyed, roads cratered. The infrastructure of an entire nation shattered. And then they passed a Canadian supply depot. Helena's breath caught. Crates stacked 4 meters high, rows and rows of them. Food, medicine, fuel, ammunition, equipment. Everything organized with military precision. Everything abundant beyond imagination. Tanks parked in perfect lines, dozens of them. All new, all functional. The Wehrmacht tanks she'd seen were ancient, breaking down constantly, running on scraps of fuel. These Canadian tanks looked like they'd rolled out of the factory yesterday. Soldiers stood in formation. Helena estimated their physical condition from years of medical experience. Average weight, maybe 75 kilograms, healthy, strong, well-fed. The German soldiers she'd treated over the past year averaged 64 kilograms. Many weighed less, malnourished, sick, broken. Frida pressed her face against the canvas. "How?" she whispered. "How do they have so much?" Helena had no answer. The propaganda said the Allies were on the verge of collapse, running out of supplies, desperate, weak. The evidence before her eyes said something very different. They drove for 2 days, stopped at temporary camps, fed 3 times each day, given blankets, latrines, clean water. At one stop, Keta asked a Canadian guard a question in broken English. "Why you give food we enemy?" The guard, a young woman maybe 23 years old, looked confused. "Your people," she said simply. "People need food." As if it were that obvious, that simple. People need food. Nationality didn't matter. Helena turned away before the guard could see her expression. They reached a train station on April 21st. Helena braced herself. Now. Now came the freight cars, the tight spaces, the darkness, the fear. The train was a passenger train, real passenger cars, with seats and windows and a washroom, running water, a toilet that flushed. Frida stood in the tiny bathroom and cried. Just cried and cried, because there was running water, because she could wash her hands, because the basic dignities of human existence were being granted to her even though she was a prisoner of war. They travelled for 2 more days, through France to the coast, fed 3 times daily, breakfast, lunch, dinner, like clockwork. A Canadian nurse came to check on them, Lieutenant Sarah McLeod, 29 years old, from a place called Saskatchewan. She spoke some German, enough to communicate. "Where are we going?" Helena asked. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was genuine, warm. "To Canada. You'll be safe there. The war is almost over anyway." "Safe," Helena repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. "You're medical personnel," Sarah said. "You'll be treated well. We follow the rules." The rules. The Geneva Convention. The international laws of war. Helena had been taught those rules in nursing school, before the party, before the ideology, when medicine was about healing, not about politics. "What happens in Canada?" Keta asked. Sarah shrugged. "You'll be in a camp. But camps in Canada they're not like camps here. You'll have food, shelter, activities. Some prisoners even work if they want to." "Work?" Helena frowned. "Forced labor." No, voluntary, paid work, if you choose." Sarah seemed genuinely troubled by the misunderstanding. "We don't force prisoners to work. That's illegal." Illegal. There was that word again. Laws, rules, things that constrained behavior even toward enemies. Helena had stopped believing in constraints. The party taught her that strength meant doing whatever was necessary, whatever achieved victory. Rules were for the weak. But these Canadians were strong. Their army was winning the war, and they followed rules. The contradiction made her head ache. On April 24th, they reached the Atlantic coast. Helena stood on the dock and stared at the ocean. She'd never seen anything so vast, so terrifying. Grey water stretching to the horizon, endless. The ship waiting for them was enormous. White paint, red crosses on the sides, the HMS Letitia, a hospital ship, not a transport barge, not a prison ship, a hospital ship. Helena had expected to be herded into cargo holds, dark spaces below deck where prisoners belonged. Instead, they were assigned to passenger cabins. Actual cabins, with beds 8 women per room. Real mattresses with springs inside. Not wooden boards, not hay-filled sacks. Real mattresses. Each cabin had a sink, with running water. Cold water, yes, but clean. And a toilet. That flushed. A Canadian doctor came to examine each nurse. Professional medical examinations, checking for disease, for injuries, for health problems. The doctor was respectful, thorough. She explained what she was doing before she did it. She said please and thank you. Helena submitted to the examination in a daze. Nothing made sense anymore. Prisoners didn't get medical care. Enemies didn't get treated with courtesy. That night, lying in a real bed with a real pillow, Helena stared at the ceiling. Frida's voice came from the darkness. "Frau Brandt, are you awake?" "Yes." Do you think maybe they're not going to kill us?" Helena's hand moved to her pocket. The pills were still there. She'd carried them for 8 days now, through capture, through transport, through every moment of unexpected kindness. "I don't know," she whispered. But she did know. Somewhere deep inside, past the ideology and the propaganda and the 12 years of certainty, she knew. They weren't going to be killed. They were going to be treated as prisoners of war, according to international law, with dignity, with basic humanity, which meant everything she'd believed was a lie. The ship departed the next morning, April 25th, into the Atlantic Ocean. 10 days of sailing ahead. 10 days to cross from one world to another, from Europe destroyed by war to a continent untouched by bombs, from the Reich that was crumbling to the Allied powers that had already won. Helena stood at the rail and watched the French coast disappear. Behind her, everything she'd ever known. Ahead, complete uncertainty. The pills were still in her pocket. She could throw them overboard, let them sink to the bottom of the ocean, let go of the fear they represented. But she kept them, because letting go of fear meant accepting truth. And she wasn't ready for that yet. Not yet. The Atlantic was grey and cold and endless, like the future, like the questions she couldn't answer, like the 12 years of her life that might have been built on lies. She watched the waves until darkness fell, until there was nothing to see but water, nothing to hold on to but doubt. And for the first time in her adult life, Helena Brandt allowed herself to doubt. Not out loud, not where anyone could see, but inside, where the pills pressed against her palm, where the fear lived, where the certainty used to be. Doubt crept in, small, quiet, persistent. And the ocean carried her toward answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. May 4th, 1945. Halifax, Nova Scotia. The ship docked at dawn. Helena stood at the rail and tried to understand what she was seeing. A city, an intact city. Buildings standing straight and whole. No rubble. No bomb craters. No burned-out shells of homes where families used to live. Electric lights everywhere. Street lamps still burning in the early morning. Shop windows lit from inside. As if electricity was so abundant they didn't need to ration it. As if they could waste light. The harbour was organised chaos. Dozens of ships, hundreds of workers. Everything moving with precision. Cranes lifting cargo. Trucks lined up in perfect rows, soldiers in formation. This was what a country looked like when war didn't touch it, when bombs didn't fall from the sky, when cities didn't burn. Frida pressed against Helena's shoulder. "They're not worried about air raids." The observation was so simple, so devastating. No air raid sirens, no anti-aircraft guns pointed at the sky, no shelters. No fear, because no enemy planes could reach this far. The war never came here. Helena's hands gripped the rail. 12 years. 12 years of being told the Allies were weak, desperate, on the verge of collapse, that Germany was strong, superior, destined to win. But Germany was rubble, and Canada was whole. Evidence. Cold, undeniable. Evidence. They processed through customs like regular travelers, not prisoners. Travelers. Paperwork. Photographs. Identity cards with their pictures on them. Helena's card said, "Prisoner of war, medical personnel" in English. She couldn't read it, but a Canadian administrator explained in German. "You're assigned to Transport Unit 7, the woman said. Her uniform was crisp, her desk organized. She stamped forms with mechanical efficiency. Destination Medicine Hat, Alberta. Another train. About 3,500 kilometers. 3,500 kilometers. Across an entire continent. Helena tried to imagine that distance. Failed. Another train. Clean. Heated. Passenger seats. They pulled away from Halifax on May 5th. Helena watched the city disappear. Then forests appeared. Endless forests. Trees that hadn't been cut down for fuel. Woods that hadn't been burned by artillery. Then lakes. So many lakes. Some so large they looked like oceans. Water everywhere. Clean water. Abundant water. Keta kept a notebook now, writing observations, dates, details. May 6th, she wrote. Passed through a city called Montreal. No destroyed buildings. Children playing in parks. How is this possible? The Canadians kept feeding them 3 meals, every day, without exception. Real coffee. Not the burned grain substitute the Wehrmacht called coffee, actual coffee beans. The smell alone made Helena's chest tight. Bread, fresh every morning, butter, fruit. On May 7th, an orange appeared on Helena's breakfast plate. She stared at it, touched the skin, rough, dimpled, orange. The color seemed impossibly bright, artificial, like something from a dream. She hadn't seen citrus fruit since 1939, 6 years ago, before the war turned serious, before the rationing, before the hunger. Her hands shook as she peeled it. The smell burst out, sweet, sharp, alive. Juice ran down her fingers. She separated a segment, put it in her mouth. The taste exploded. Her body remembered. Her cells remembered what real food was, what nourishment felt like, what it meant to not be hungry. She bent over the orange and cried, quietly, so the others wouldn't see. But they were crying too, over oranges, over coffee, over bread, over the simple fact of having enough. May 8th, 1945. Medicine Hat, Alberta. The train stopped at a small town. Prairie stretched in every direction. Flatland, big sky, endless space. A truck waited to take them the last 15 kilometers. To the camp. Helena expected barbed wire, guard towers, machine guns, the architecture of imprisonment. The camp had a fence, but it was wooden, maybe 2 meters high, more to mark boundaries than to fortify against escape. Escape to where they were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by prairie, thousands of kilometers from anything familiar. 550 German prisoners total, 523 men in one section, 27 women in another, separated, protected. The women's section had 8 wooden buildings for sleeping, a dining hall, an activities building, a small medical office. Each building was heated, had solid walls, kept out the wind. Helena was assigned a bed, a metal frame, a mattress, a blanket, a pillow, her own bed. Not shared. Not a mat on the floor. A bed. The bathroom had running water, toilets that flushed, sinks, mirrors. Frida turned on a faucet and watched water pour out. "It doesn't stop," she said. "You can just use it as much as you want." Keta opened a door and found the activities building. Inside a library. Books in German, real books, literature, history, science. Prisoners could just take them, read them, return them. A radio, playing music, craft supplies, paper, pencils, paint, and in the corner, a piano. For prisoners, for enemies. Helena stood in the doorway and couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her brain refused to process it. In the Wehrmacht, soldiers got punished for the smallest infractions, beaten for being late, imprisoned for questioning orders, shot for desertion. Here prisoners got pianos. She walked back to her building, lay on her bed, stared at the ceiling. The pills were still in her pocket. She hadn't taken them, hadn't needed them, hadn't thrown them away. She didn't know what to do with evidence that contradicted everything she believed. So she lay there, silent, broken, waiting for something to make sense again. It didn't come. May 9th, 1945. Major Duncan Fairweather came to address the women. He was 42 years old, from Calgary, greying hair, calm demeanour. He stood at the front of the dining hall and looked at each of the 27 women. "We have a problem," he said in careful German. "The hospital in Medicine Hat doesn't have enough nurses. Many of our Canadian nurses are overseas, supporting the war effort. We need medical help." He paused. "Let that sink in. You're still nurses. You have skills we need. Would you be willing to work at the hospital under supervision?" Silence. Complete. Suffocating. Silence. "The work would be voluntary," Fairweather continued. "No one has to do it. You'd be paid 50 cents per day, better food, more freedom to move around the town." Helena's mind went blank. Work at a Canadian hospital, treating Canadian civilians paid voluntary. Every word was impossible. Frida's hand shot up immediately. "I'll do it." Keta raised her hand more slowly. "What's the trick?" she asked. "What do you really want from us?" Fairweather shook his head. "No trick. We need nurses. You are nurses. You'll work with Canadian supervisors. That's all." Helena sat frozen. 12 years of ideology screamed at her. Don't collaborate. Don't help the enemy. Don't betray the fatherland. But another voice, quieter, newer, whispered, "You're a nurse. Nurses help the sick. That's the code, the oath, the purpose." Her hand raised, almost against her will. "I'll work too." From the back of the room a woman stood, Gerda Schröder, 40 years old. Her husband had been a Wehrmacht officer, a true believer. "You're traitors," Gerda said. Her voice shook with rage. "All of you. When we return to Germany, you'll be punished for this." Helena turned, looked at her, and for the first time she didn't care what a Nazi loyalist thought. "I'm a nurse," she said quietly. "I'll do what nurses do." May 15th, 1945. Medicine Hat General Hospital, 247 beds, clean corridors, windows that let in light, equipment that worked. The head nurse was Margaret Callahan, 36 years old, Saskatchewan farm background. Tough, fair. She didn't waste words. "You're assigned to the maternity ward," she told Helena. "You'll assist with deliveries, patient care, standard nursing duties, questions." "No, ma'am." "Then let's get to work." The maternity ward smelled like antiseptic and hope. New life, beginning. The opposite of the field hospitals Helena had worked in. The opposite of death and wounds and broken soldiers. A woman was in labour. Her name was Eleanor Davies, 28 years old, first baby. Her husband was fighting in Europe, against Germans, against Helena's countrymen. New nurse? Eleanor asked between contractions. Her face was pale, sweating. Yes, Margaret said. This is Nurse Brandt. She's very experienced. Helena washed her hands, put on gloves, examined Eleanor, checked dilation, monitored the baby's heartbeat, did everything she'd been trained to do, because training went deeper than politics, deeper than ideology, down to the core of what she was, a nurse. 6 hours later, Eleanor's son was born. Healthy, 7 pounds, strong lungs. He screamed his arrival into the world with fury. Helena cleaned him, wrapped him in a blanket, placed him in Eleanor's arms. Eleanor looked up at her, exhausted, radiant. Thank you, nurse. What's your name? Helena Brandt. Thank you, Helena. You have gentle hands. Gentle hands. Helena stood there, holding surgical instruments, covered in birth fluids, having just helped an enemy woman bring an enemy child into the world. And the woman thanked her, called her hands gentle, smiled at her with genuine gratitude. The propaganda said Canadians would spit on Germans, curse them, hate them. This woman smiled. Helena excused herself, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, stared at her hands. Gentle hands. 12 years of service to an ideology that preached superiority and strength and domination. And this Canadian woman saw gentle hands. Maybe. Maybe she'd been looking at herself wrong. Maybe the party had taught her to see herself as a soldier in a cause, when really she was just a nurse, helping people, regardless of who they were. The thought was dangerous, treasonous. It undermined everything. She pushed it down, went back to work. 3 months passed. Helena delivered 23 babies. 3 months. 23 new lives. She learned their mothers' names, learned to joke with them during labor, learned that pain and joy mixed together in a delivery room regardless of nationality. One grandmother gave her a knitted scarf, blue wool, handmade. You took care of my daughter, the woman said. You're an angel. An angel. A German. A Nazi. Called an angel by a Canadian grandmother. Helena wore the scarf. Couldn't bring herself to refuse it. Couldn't explain why it made her throat tight every time she touched it. The hospital cafeteria fed staff unlimited food. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. All of it available. All of it free. Helena stepped on a scale in June. Had gained 8 kilograms. In 1 month. 8 kilograms. Her body was remembering what healthy meant, what fed meant, what not starving meant. She looked in a mirror one day and didn't recognize herself. Her cheeks had color. Her eyes weren't sunken. Her uniform didn't hang loose on a skeletal frame. This was what she looked like when she wasn't at war, when she wasn't hungry, when she wasn't terrified. She barely remembered this version of herself from before 1939, from before everything went wrong. September 1945. Dr. Thomas Brennan requested Helena for a complex surgery, appendectomy, complications, patient crashing. Helena scrubbed in, assisted, handed instruments with practiced precision, anticipated his needs, worked as a seamless part of the surgical team. When it was over, the patient stable, Brennan pulled down his mask. You're one of the finest surgical nurses I've worked with, he said. Helena nodded. Professional acknowledgement. Nothing more. But later, Margaret pulled her aside. You know about Dr. Brennan's brother? No. Patrick Brennan, 22 years old, killed at Juno Beach, June 6, 1944, D-Day. Helena's breath stopped. Juno Beach. Canadian landing site, facing German defences. She knew what happened there, the casualties, the fighting. Dr. Brennan's brother was killed by Germans, Margaret continued. By your army, your country. And he just called you one of the finest nurses he's worked with. Helena couldn't speak, couldn't process it. She found Dr. Brennan later, in the corridor, alone. "Dr. Brennan, Margaret told me about your brother. I'm sorry." He turned, looked at her with tired eyes. "Thank you. I don't understand how you can work with me, how you can trust me. Your brother died fighting against Germans." Brennan was quiet for a moment. Then, "You didn't kill Patrick. A war killed Patrick. A war started by governments and ideologies. Not by nurses trying to save lives." He paused. "In an operating room, only skill and compassion matter. I don't care where you're from. I care that you know what you're doing, that you help me save lives, and you do." "But I believed in the ideology that started the war. I was a Nazi." "Were. Past tense." He met her eyes. "The woman I work with now questions everything, learns constantly, treats every patient with dignity. That's who you are now. Who you were then doesn't define who you choose to be today." He walked away, left Helena standing in the corridor. Choose who to be, not determined by the past, not locked into ideology. A choice. The concept was so foreign it hurt. December 1945. The war had been over for 7 months. Germany had surrendered May 8th. But the nurses couldn't go home yet. Germany was destroyed, occupied, starving, no safe way to transport prisoners back. So they stayed, worked, lived in the camp, adapted. The camp divided into factions, 30 women still loyal to Nazi ideology, led by Gerda Schroeder. They refused to work, kept military discipline, saluted in secret, plotted what they'd say when they returned home, how they'd report the traitors. 60 women just wanted to survive, didn't think about politics, did what they were told, kept their heads down, waited for the war to end completely so they could go home. 22 women, including Helena, openly rejected the propaganda, learned English, worked at jobs in town, read Canadian newspapers, allowed themselves to see what they'd been forbidden to see. Gerda confronted Helena at dinner one night. "You shame Germany by working for the enemy." Helena looked up from her plate, calm, certain. "I shame Germany by denying truth. When we return home, you'll be tried for collaboration. Then I'll tell them exactly what I learned here, that everything we were taught was lies, that the Canadians won because they were better than us, not stronger, not more brutal, better, more humane, more civilized." Gerda's face went red. "You're a traitor to the fatherland. The fatherland lied to me for 12 years. I won't lie to myself anymore." Other women watched. Some nodded, others looked away. The division was complete. December 25th, 1945. Christmas. The Canadian nurses invited the German prisoners to a party at the hospital. Helena didn't want to go. It felt wrong, celebrating with the enemy, pretending everything was fine, forgetting which side she was on. But Frida convinced her. "They're not treating us like enemies. Why should we treat them that way?" Helena had no good answer. The hospital cafeteria was decorated. A Christmas tree covered in lights, paper chains hanging from the ceiling, candles on every table, the smell of pine branches mixed with cinnamon and coffee. 40 people. Canadian doctors and nurses, German prisoners, some patients well enough to join, all sitting together. The food was overwhelming. Turkey with stuffing, cranberries, mashed potatoes, 3 different pies, coffee, wine, actual wine, for prisoners. Helena sat at the end of a table, didn't talk to anyone, watched Frida laugh with Canadian nurses, watched Keta smile for the first time in months, felt angry at them for forgetting, for adapting, for accepting this. But the food smelled wonderful. She had to admit that. Turkey. Real turkey. She hadn't eaten poultry like this since before the war. After the meal, Margaret Callahan stood, held up a glass of wine, waited for silence. "I want to make a toast," she said. Her voice carried across the room. "To our friends and family who are far away. To peace. To healing." She paused, looked directly at the German nurses. "And to our German colleagues who have helped us save lives this year. Thank you." Everyone clapped. Helena felt her face burn. She didn't know what to do, where to look, how to respond. Then someone walked toward her table. Dr. Thomas Brennan. He stopped beside her, held out his hand. "Nurse Brandt, I want to thank you for your help in surgery these past months. You are one of the finest nurses I have ever worked with." Helena stared at his hand, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This man's brother died at Juno Beach, killed by Germans, by her army, her country, her ideology, and he was thanking her, calling her one of the finest nurses, treating her with respect, with professional courtesy, with humanity. 8 months of accumulating evidence, 8 months of cognitive dissonance, 8 months of holding 2 contradictory realities in her mind. It all collapsed at once. Tears poured down her face. She couldn't stop them, couldn't control them. 8 months of fear and confusion, and slowly crumbling certainty came crashing down. She stood, too fast, knocked her chair backward. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm sorry, I can't." She ran, out of the cafeteria, through the corridors, out the back door into the night. December 25th, 1945. 9:47 p.m. The cold hit like a physical blow. 15 degrees below zero. Snow everywhere, white and pristine and endless. The sky was black, full of stars. More stars than Helena had ever seen. No city lights to drown them out. Just darkness and stars and cold. She stood in the snow, steam rising from her mouth with every breath, tears freezing on her cheeks. Behind her, yellow light spilled from the cafeteria windows. Inside, music played. Silent Night. First in English, then in German. The same song, different languages, same meaning. The door opened. Frida came out. Didn't say anything, just stood beside Helena, waiting. After a long moment, Keta appeared, carrying coats. "You'll freeze," she said, handed Helena her coat. They stood together in the snow. 3 German women, thousands of kilometers from home, in a country that treated them better than their own government ever had. "Are you okay?" Frida asked finally. Helena shook her head. "No." "I'm not okay. Everything I believed was lies. Everything we were taught was propaganda." Her voice broke. "They told us the Canadians would torture us, kill us, that we were superior and they were weak. That cruelty was strength. That domination was destiny." She looked up at the stars. "It was all lies, Frida, all of it." "Yes." Frida's voice was gentle. "And we survived long enough to learn the truth." Keta pulled her coat tighter. "What happens when we go home to Germany?" None of them answered. They knew. Germany was destroyed, starving, broken. The truth they'd learned here wouldn't be welcome. People still believing Nazi lies would call them traitors. People who'd lost everything would hate that they survived while eating well. Truth was a gift and a curse. Inside, someone played the piano. Silent night again, slow, gentle. The melody drifted out through the walls. Helena looked up at the stars. Somewhere across the ocean was what used to be her country. Here was a place that treated her with dignity she didn't deserve, with kindness she hadn't earned. with rules that protected even enemies. She wasn't the same person who was captured 8 months ago. That person believed propaganda and followed orders without question. That person thought she knew the truth. This person standing in the snow knew what real truth looked like, knew what evidence meant, knew that ideology crumbled when confronted with reality. She would never be that old person again. Couldn't be. Even if she wanted to. Even if it would make going home easier. The truth had changed her. Permanently. Irrevocably. And standing in the snow on Christmas night, thousands of kilometers from home, Helena Brandt finally let go of the pills in her pocket. She threw them into the snow, watched them disappear into white. Gone. She didn't need them anymore. She'd survived. Not because she was strong, not because she was superior, but because someone chose mercy instead of revenge, chose rules instead of cruelty, chose humanity instead of hate. The Canadians had defeated her ideology without firing a shot at her. They'd fed her, healed her, shown her a different way. That victory was more complete than any battlefield win could ever be. She stood in the snow and let the truth settle into her bones. Let it become real. Let it change her. And somewhere in the darkness, in the cold, under all those stars, Helena Brandt became someone new. Someone who knew the price of lies and the value of truth. Someone who would carry that knowledge for the rest of her life. However long that might be, wherever it might lead. The truth had set her free, even if freedom felt like standing alone in the snow, even if it meant going home to a country that wouldn't want to hear it. Truth mattered more than comfort, more than acceptance, more than belonging. She'd learned that lesson in 8 months, in Medicine Hat, Alberta, in a place she'd never heard of before capture, from people she'd been taught to hate, and she would never forget it. Never. September 1946. The official papers came to the camp. All German prisoners would return home by December 31st. The Medicine Hat group would leave October 15th. Some women felt relief. Others felt fear. All of them knew what waited across the ocean. Helena looked at the notice and said quietly, "We're going from abundance to hell." Nobody disagreed. October 10th, 1946. Medicine Hat General Hospital. The Canadian staff threw a goodbye party in the cafeteria. Small, quiet, nothing like Christmas. Just cake and coffee and the weight of endings. Margaret Callahan gave each German nurse a gift, medical textbooks in English and German, bandages and supplies they could take home. Small personal things, photos, letters. She put her hand on Helena's shoulder. "You are one of the best nurses I ever trained. Germany is lucky to have you back." Helena couldn't speak. Lucky. Germany wouldn't see it that way. Dr. Brennan gave Frida a letter, typed on hospital letterhead. Official. "A recommendation," he said, "for any nursing school, anywhere. You're an excellent nurse, Frida. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Frida held the letter like it was made of glass, like it might shatter. "Thank you, Dr. Brennan, for everything." The hospital cooks gave Kete a handwritten cookbook, recipes for all the meals she'd loved. Turkey, pie, fresh bread, things she'd probably never taste again. An old woman named Mrs. Henderson came to say goodbye. Her grandson had been in Kete's ward. Pneumonia. He'd almost died. Kete had sat with him through 3 nights, held his hand, sang to him in German when he was too sick to understand English. Mrs. Henderson hugged Kete, hard, long. "You took care of my boy. You will always be welcome in Canada. Always welcome in Canada, not in Germany, not in the country she was born in, but in the enemy country that had treated her like a human being." Kete cried into the old woman's shoulder. October the 15th, 1946. The train left Medicine Hat at dawn. Helena sat by the window, watched the prairie disappear, the same tracks they'd travelled 18 months ago. But everything felt different now. Different because she was different, transformed, changed in ways that couldn't be undone. Frida pressed her face to the glass. "I'm leaving the first place that ever treated me like a human being instead of a tool." Keta stared at her hands. "Will Germany ever look like this? No damage, no war, just peace." Helena didn't answer, couldn't answer. She knew what Germany looked like now. The reports came through. Destroyed, occupied, starving, broken. She wrote in her diary instead, the same diary she'd kept hidden since capture, pages and pages of observations, evidence, truth. October 15th, 1946, leaving Medicine Hat, returning to a country that won't recognize me, to a people who will call me traitor for learning what I learned, for seeing what I saw, for choosing truth over loyalty to lies. I am not the same person who left Germany. That person is dead. Died somewhere between the poison pills and the Christmas party, between propaganda and evidence, between what I was taught to believe and what I witnessed with my own eyes. I don't know who I am now, only who I'm not. Not a Nazi, not anymore. Never again. She closed the diary, watched Canada pass by for the last time. October 16th, 1946, Halifax. The ship waiting was called the SS Marine Raven, not a hospital ship like the HMS Letitia, a cargo ship, converted to carry people. The conditions were harder, more crowded, basic food, enough but basic. 380 German prisoners from different Canadian camps, all going home, some excited, some terrified, all uncertain. The crossing took 12 days. During the voyage, news came over the radio. Nuremberg, the trials, sentences being handed down. Some Nazi leaders would hang, others would spend life in prison, the whole world watching as Germany's leadership was held accountable. The prisoners who still loved the party were quiet after that broadcast. Gerda Schroeder sat in her bunk and stared at nothing, her certainty cracking. Finally. The ship also got reports about Germany's coming winter. Not enough food, not enough fuel. People would freeze, people would starve. Helena stood on deck and looked at the Atlantic. Grey, cold, endless, like the future. "We're bringing truth back to a place that doesn't want truth," she said to Frida. Frida nodded. "I know." They didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. October 28th, 1946, Bremerhaven, Germany. Helena saw her homeland for the first time in 18 months. What she saw made her want to cry. The port was destroyed, some of it rebuilt, British engineers working, cranes functioning, but most of it was still rubble, mountains of broken concrete, twisted metal, the bones of buildings that used to stand. People walked through the ruins, thin people, skeletal people, wearing whatever clothes they could find, faces hollow, eyes empty. British soldiers with guns controlled everything, checkpoints, documents, authority. This was defeat, real defeat, not the propaganda version, not the noble sacrifice version, just broken, utterly broken. They processed through a camp. British administrators asked questions. How were you treated in Canada? Some women lied, said the Canadians were cruel, mean, hard, because that's what the questioners wanted to hear. What fit the narrative? What made sense in a world where enemies were supposed to be brutal? Helena told the truth. They treated us well, fed us, gave us work, paid us, taught us important things. The British officer writing her answers looked up, studied her face, then marked her paper with a stamp. She couldn't read English well enough to know what it said. But later, another prisoner who spoke English translated, "Potentially subversive." The government thought she might cause trouble, might spread dangerous ideas, might tell people things they shouldn't hear, like the truth. They searched all the bags, took the medical supplies Margaret had given them, confiscated the textbooks, the bandages, the equipment. "Prisoners cannot bring foreign materials into Germany," the soldier said. Not cruel, just following orders, just doing his job. Helena watched her gifts disappear into a crate, labelled, filed, gone. But they didn't take the diary. It was small, personal, just a notebook. They let her keep it. They gave each woman a travel permit. Papers allowing movement to home regions. Ketter's said Berlin. Soviet sector. Frieda's said Bavaria. American sector. Helena's said Hamburg. British sector. 3 different zones, 3 different occupying powers. Germany divided, cut apart. Like it had cut apart Europe. They boarded different trains, going different directions. Helena hugged Frieda, then Ketter, held them tight. These 2 women who'd survived with her, who'd learned with her, who'd changed with her. "Remember what we learned," Helena said. Frieda nodded. "Always." Ketter's jaw was tight. "They'll call us traitors." "Let them." Helena's voice was steady. "We know the truth. That's what matters." The trains pulled away, in different directions, carrying them to different futures, different fates. Helena watched through the window as her companions disappeared. She was alone now, alone with the truth. November 2nd, 1946. Hamburg. Helena's old neighborhood was half destroyed. Buildings with walls missing, roofs collapsed, windows empty, like skulls, like the city had been bombed and never healed. Her mother was living in the basement of a bombed building, 4 families sharing the space. No heat, no running water, candles for light. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation. Helena knocked on the makeshift door. Plywood, hinges made from wire. Her mother opened it. For a moment neither spoke, just looked, mother and daughter, separated by 18 months, by a war, by an ocean, by everything that had changed. Then her mother's face hardened. "Where were you while we starved? I was captured. I was a prisoner in Canada. Living with the enemy." Her mother's voice was acid. "Eating their food, while we had nothing. I didn't choose to be captured. You chose to survive. You chose them over us." Helena tried to explain. The Canadian treatment, the hospital work, the evidence, the truth. Her mother didn't want to hear it, wouldn't hear it. "Your brother died fighting in Russia," she said. Her voice shook. "Died for the fatherland. And you collaborated. You're a traitor." "I learned the truth." "The truth?" Her mother laughed, bitter, broken. "The truth is, you're alive and comfortable while loyal Germans died. That's the truth. That's not—" "Get out!" Her mother's hand on the door, pushing it closed. "You're not my daughter anymore. My daughter would have died with honor. You're a collaborator, a coward. I curse the day you came back." The door closed. Helena stood in the ruins, in the cold, in the place she used to call home. Not home anymore. Not for her. Not now. Maybe not ever again. She found a refugee shelter, a church basement, cots lined up in rows, families huddled together, everyone hungry, everyone cold, everyone trying to survive the first winter of peace. She got a job at a hospital for displaced persons. The work was hard, the conditions terrible. No supplies, no medicine, no heat. Just desperation and death. But she used everything she'd learned in Medicine Hat. Canadian methods, Canadian efficiency, Canadian compassion. She didn't tell anyone where she'd learned it, just did the work, saved who she could save, mourned who she couldn't. And at night, she wrote in her diary, letters she never sent, thoughts she couldn't speak aloud. November 15th, 1946. Hamburg is hell. But I cannot return to lies to make it easier. I cannot pretend the Canadians were cruel, cannot deny what I witnessed, cannot betray the truth to fit the narrative people want to hear. This is the price. Isolation, rejection, suspicion. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is lying to myself. And I've done that long enough. April 1948. A letter came, forwarded through British mail services, from Canada. Margaret Callahan's handwriting. Helena opened it with shaking hands. Dear Helena, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking about you, about all of you, wondering how you're managing in Germany. I have an offer. I can sponsor you to immigrate to Canada. There's work here. The hospital needs nurses, good nurses. You're one of the best I've trained. It won't be easy. The immigration process is complicated, but I can help. If you want to come, think about it. Write back. With respect, Margaret Callahan. Helena read the letter 17 times. Immigration to Canada, leaving Germany, leaving her homeland, her language, her culture, everything familiar, becoming an immigrant, a foreigner, starting over in a place where she'd once been a prisoner, but also leaving the suspicion, the hunger, the ruins, the rejection, going to a place that valued her skills, that treated her with dignity, that followed rules. She thought about it for 6 months, thought about what it meant to abandon Germany, to give up on her country. But Germany had given up on her first. Germany had lied to her, used her, discarded her, called her traitor for learning truth. In September 1948, she wrote back to Margaret, "Yes, I want to come." June 1950. Helena Brandt stepped off a train in Regina, Saskatchewan, 39 years old, carrying one suitcase, starting over. Margaret met her at the station, older now, greyer, but the same steady presence. "Welcome home," Margaret said. Home. Such a strange word. Home wasn't where you were born, not always. Sometimes home was where people treated you with dignity, where your skills mattered, where truth was valued more than loyalty to lies. Helena worked at Regina General Hospital for the next 30 years, delivered thousands of babies, trained dozens of nurses, became a Canadian citizen in 1955. She never married, never had children, gave her whole life to nursing, to the code, to the oath, to helping people regardless of who they were or where they came from. Margaret became her closest friend, until Margaret died in 1978. Heart attack, quick, peaceful. Helena spoke at the funeral, told stories about Medicine Hat, about the German nurses, about what Margaret taught her. "She showed me that rules matter," Helena said, "that humanity transcends conflict, that who you choose to become matters more than who you used to be." She lived alone after that, in a small apartment. Books, photos, memories. She kept the diary, all those pages from 1945 and 1946, evidence of transformation, of learning, of change. Sometimes she took it out and read, remembered who she used to be, who she'd become, never forgot. Frida's path was different. She stayed in Bavaria, worked at a small hospital in the countryside, used Dr. Brennan's recommendation letter to get into nursing school in 1951. By 1960, she was the head nurse at a teaching hospital in Munich, training the next generation, teaching them not just medicine, but ethics, humanity, the importance of following rules even when it was hard. She married an American soldier in 1952, had 3 children, raised them to question authority, to value evidence over ideology, to think for themselves. She kept writing letters to the Canadian family who'd been kind to her, the MacLeods. For 40 years they exchanged letters, photos, stories. In 1975, at age 52, she went back to Medicine Hat with her family. A visit, an anniversary, 30 years since capture. She saw Margaret, saw Dr. Brennan. Both old now, retired. But they remembered her. They stood in the hospital, in the maternity ward where she'd worked, and cried together. About time, about change, about survival. "You taught me what kindness looked like," Frida told them. "In the darkest time of my life, you showed me light." She died in 2015, age 92, surrounded by children and grandchildren, peaceful. Her last words were in English. "Thank you." Keta had the hardest time. Berlin was divided, dangerous. The Soviet sector where she lived was harsh, controlled, suspicious of anyone who'd been in Western custody. She worked in hospitals under terrible conditions, Soviet oversight, constant surveillance, fear. But she used the Canadian medical knowledge, quietly, secretly, never saying where she learned it, just doing the work, saving lives. In 1950, during the Berlin blockade, she escaped to West Berlin, crossed the sector boundary at night, risked being shot, made it through. She got a job at an American field hospital. The American doctors noticed her unusual nursing skills, advanced techniques, efficient methods. "Where did you learn this?" they asked. "Wartime experience," she said. "Not lying, not exactly, just not telling the whole truth." In 1953, she married a German-American soldier, moved to Minnesota, started over. From 1955 to 1985, she worked as a nurse in Minneapolis, taught other nurses the Canadian methods, called them modern techniques or advanced protocols. Never said Canadian, never explained. In 1987, at age 61, she went back to Germany for the first time in 37 years. Took her daughter, showed her the ruins that had been rebuilt, the city that had recovered, and finally told her daughter the true story about Medicine Hat, about the Canadians, about learning that enemies could be more humane than your own government. Her daughter recorded it, audio tape, an oral history, preserved. Keta died in 2008, age 82, heart failure, quick. She'd kept the cookbook all those years, the recipes from Medicine Hat, worn, stained, treasured. It was buried with her. May 1995, Medicine Hat, Alberta. 50 years since the war ended. 50 years since capture. 50 years since You're Still Nurses. The town organized a reunion, invited former German prisoners to return. A ceremony, a remembrance, a recognition. 12 former prisoners came, from different countries, different lives. All between 70 and 80 years old now. Helena was there, 84, walking with a cane, back straight, eyes clear. Frida was there, 72, grey hair, warm smile, surrounded by family. Keta was there, 69, quiet, intense, watchful. They stood together in front of Medicine Hat General Hospital. The building was modern now, updated, expanded, but still recognizable. Still a place of healing. A memorial sign had been installed. Bronze plaque on stone. It read, "You're Still Nurses, in honor of German nurses who served here." 1945 to 1946. proving humanity transcends conflict. The three women stood in front of it, silent, remembering. Local students came to interview them, a history project recording first-hand accounts before the generation died. A young girl, maybe 16, asked the question, "Did you forgive the Canadians for winning the war?" Helena looked at her. This child, born long after the war, growing up in peace, never knowing hunger, never knowing fear, never knowing what it meant to have your certainty shattered by evidence. She smiled, small, sad, wise. "No," she said quietly. "I thank them." "There's a difference." The girl looked confused. Helena continued, "Forgiveness implies they did something wrong. They didn't. They won because they were better than us, not stronger, not more brutal, better, more civilized, more humane." She paused, choosing words carefully. "They defeated us not with weapons, but by defeating our lies with truth, by showing us evidence we couldn't deny, by treating us with dignity we didn't deserve, by following rules we'd abandoned." "That's the victory that lasts," Frida added. "Not conquest, conviction." Ketta's voice was rough. "When evidence contradicts belief, you have a choice. Deny the evidence or change the belief. I chose evidence. That choice saved my life." The reunion lasted 3 days. Tours, presentations, meals together, stories exchanged. On the last evening, they asked Helena to speak, to record a final testimony for history, for memory, for the future. She sat in front of a camera, 84 years old, a lifetime of nursing, of service, of living with truth. "I served an ideology blindly for 12 years, she said. Believed everything they told me, never questioned, never doubted, because doubt was weakness. Because questioning was betrayal. Because certainty felt like strength. Then I was captured, and I watched evidence for 8 months. Evidence that contradicted everything I believed. And I had to choose, keep believing the lies or accept the truth." She leaned forward, intense, urgent. "The question isn't whether you were lied to. Everyone gets lied to. Governments lie, leaders lie, ideologies lie. The question is, when evidence contradicts belief, which do you trust? I chose evidence. I chose truth. Even though it cost me everything. Family, home, country, identity. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was living a lie. And I'd done that long enough." Her voice softened. "They called us nurses when we expected to be called enemies. That one word, nurses, changed everything. Because it reminded us who we actually were. Not Germans or Canadians. Not soldiers or civilians. Not superior or inferior. Just people, doing a job, following a code, helping whoever needed help. That's what humanity looks like when you strip away the propaganda, the ideology, the nationalism, the hate. Just people, helping people." She paused. One last thought. "I'm 84 years old. I'll die soon. But before I do, I want to say this. Thank you. Thank you to the Canadians who showed mercy instead of revenge, who followed rules instead of rage, who treated enemies like humans. You saved more than my life. You saved who I could become. That's the greatest victory of all." Helena Brandt died in 2002, age 91, pneumonia, quick, peaceful. Frida Klein died in 2015, age 92, surrounded by family. Ketta Weber died in 2008, age 82, heart failure. Before they died, they told their stories to children, grandchildren, historians, students, anyone who would listen. They told the truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when people didn't want to hear it, even when it contradicted the narratives people preferred. Because they'd learned the hard way, truth matters more than comfort, evidence matters more than belief, humanity matters more than ideology. 27 German nurses came to Medicine Hat between 1945 and 1946. 23 lived to old age. 14 eventually moved to Canada or North America. 8 kept contact with Canadian friends for their whole lives. None ever reported being mistreated in the POW camps. The memorial still stands in Medicine Hat, bronze on stone. Simple, clear. You're still nurses. 4 words that changed everything. 4 words that proved humanity transcends conflict. 4 words that showed how victory looks when won with honor. The war ended in 1945. But the lesson endures. In our world of division and propaganda, the question remains, when evidence contradicts belief, which do you trust? 27 German nurses learned the answer the hard way. In a prisoner of war camp in Alberta, where enemies became colleagues, where cruelty was replaced by kindness, where propaganda was defeated by truth, where 3 women, Helena Frieda and Keta, learned that the greatest strength isn't domination, it's humanity. And that lesson, more than any battle, more than any conquest, more than any ideology, that lesson is what victory actually looks like. When it's done right, when it lasts, when it changes not just the war but the people who survived it. They're all gone now, the nurses, the doctors, the guards, the patients. But the truth remains. Carved in bronze, written in diaries, recorded in testimonies. You're still nurses. 4 words, a lifetime of meaning, a legacy that endures,